you may have a new customer that's such a big airline.
We are very careful on what kind of documentation or what kind of information we are including into the model.
You're doing something I think is unique, which is sort of generative questions.
These guys are the ones who really put an architecture of intents and data and so on, and then train the model, and then create the model.
Hello.
Hello, Chris. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Good. Very good. Super happy today.
Super happy today? Where are you based out of, by the way?
I'm in Kirkland. It's a city close by to Seattle.
Okay. You like the area?
Yeah, I'm in front of the Lake Washington, so the view is quite nice, especially this moment, in the summer.
Yeah, in the summer.
It's very, very, very nice. Yeah. The few moments in Seattle that you can really appreciate the sun, the views, and so on.
Yeah, enjoy your 3 months. Well, I'm gonna sort of talk about you here, and some of sort of what you do. And if I was to do that, I would say that you are the director of cognitive AI, which sounds like, at least these days, like kind of the same thing, cognitive and AI. But it didn't always. It wasn't always. But we would love for you to talk to us today about what you do and what's going on. And you do this work at Amelia, which, interestingly enough, is a company working in the space of call centers and sort of that sort of ecosystem of helping customers get the answers they're looking for. And I think that's a very interesting subject, and we'd love for you to talk to us about that today.
Sure. No, as you say, like the cognitive AI, so it's something that what does it mean? No, so can mean anything at this moment. But yeah, in our case, starting with Amelia. So Amelia is an AI company. So we are based in New York. Our main product is also called Amelia. It's a virtual assistant, or what we like to call is a digital employee. So she is created like this.
She's a digital what?
The digital employee.
Digital employee. Oh.
Yeah. We love to, or we like to do that, so to call her like that, because at the end of the day, so Amelia is going to be hired by a company, then we're going to train Amelia on whatever the company needs to do, and then we're going to check her performance review, then we're going to improve her performance, and then probably if everything goes well, so it's going to be promoted, and so on, no? So that's more or less the idea. So we have a platform. The platform is created as a digital employee or as a virtual assistant, and this is how we believe Amelia is the place to be. No?
Fantastic. So there's a lot to unpack there. I think for some people it might sound fantastical. So maybe we'll do it in sort of small pieces. Let's talk about what exactly the problem is that you're kind of trying to solve for. Or sort of how you would think about initially sort of attacking the problem, and then how Amelia emerged from that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So for instance, in my team is the one who implement Amelia in the company. So we start from the problem, what you said, no? So usually companies, what they want to do is to increase their customer satisfaction, or they want to reduce or save some money, no? Because they have huge call centers or a lot of human agents trying to respond properly to a customer, and they want to grow. And the human capacity is limited. So with Amelia, you are able to increase that capacity as much as you can, because Amelia doesn't go to the bathroom. Amelia doesn't have vacations or something like that. She's able to attend the customers every time that you need or the customer needs. So basically, when customers come to us, is with that kind of problem. So okay, let's try to save some money. Let's increase the NPS. Let's increase the customer satisfaction. Let's decrease the handle average time of the calls or the interactions that we have with the customers. So the idea is to increase in some sort the experience that they have with the customers. No, so that's basically what they have. And then what we usually do is like, what kind of channels do you want to address these kind of problems? So usually, what we have right now with some data, and that probably you have a return of investment of this kind of solution, is call centers. Because call centers, you usually have KPIs, you usually have your agents, what kind of request the customer does, how much time they take to resolve, what is the customer satisfaction of these specific calls, etc., etc. No, so if you want to have a real impact in your bottom line, so probably you will go through the call center. Then the pandemia, the COVID situation gave us the digital part, no, which is, I don't know, WhatsApp, mobile, SMS, social media, etc., is growing, but comparing to call centers, not necessarily is the same amount. There's not the same volume. So the impact that you probably have is more in call centers, but also the social part or the digital part is also growing.
Is that in terms of, and you're speaking specifically in terms of being able to answer customer questions? So there's the call center channel, and then there's the social media channel where you're also answering questions there, and you're considering both parts in terms of what Amelia is solving for.
Exactly. And also it's very important because sometimes, depending on the customer or the company, customers are more willing to share information through, I don't know, WhatsApp or SMS or call centers rather than social media. So you don't share in your Twitter or your Facebook Messenger, hey, this is my ID, this is my passport, etc., etc. So sometimes, depending on the channel, so you will be more informative. So you will basically answer some questions, but then probably in WhatsApp, SMS, or call centers, you are more in the automated part, which at the end of the day, you are going to reduce some human agent interactions in that side.
Right. So we've talked about the channels, different ways that Amelia reaches out. Maybe we'll talk about some of the challenges with first we can talk about some of the challenges at this layer, right? And before we go into the sort of more technical layer of challenges. So at this tier, what is it like to have customers interact with this, at this level, and then how are these, or how is this interacting with these other channels, right? So, what I mean by that is, just like you said, there's going to be the expectations for each one that make things easier or harder. With call centers, the assumption is that it's as robust a person as you can get when you have a call center. And for WhatsApp, there's a little more flexibility because people actually want to speak in less time, and that's as from a customer's point of view, that's my perception of it. But if there's something else that even might be more surprising or is more unique based on your experience that you found, please go ahead. But so what is it like to sort of solve for those two places, or what have you found as issues in those two places or all these channels?
This is very interesting because each channel has their own characteristics, no? So in voice, probably, so what you will have, or in call centers, you will have some problems, for example, with names or addresses, So it's like, especially, so in my case, I'm in charge of the South European and Latin American countries. So in my case, so the English names that goes to Latin names and the combination and so on. So right now is quite difficult because probably John can be written is like a John or Yon. just as simple as that. So how can you verify these kind of things? And this is the challenge that we find when you need to have kind of verification based on spelling or something like that, or reservations with airlines. It's like, okay, my reservation is ABC 123, no? But for example, if you go for CS, MN, TD, so TD or MN is kind of phonetic is quite similar. And if you, for example, right now we are talking with wood quality, nobody is having some noise around. But if you're in the middle of the park trying to call to your airline because you are running to the airport and there is a lot of noise around, so these specific things are very challenging for a voice perspective, no? But in the other hand, in the chat, so the challenges that we find is like you can put more graphic things, you can put images, you can put buttons, you can put anything. So you make in some sort life easier for the customer. But is that intelligent enough? So what is the balance between to be natural speaking or going for too many options that you don't give the customer the freedom to express themselves? If you find like, hey, I can help you in 1, 2, 3, 4, so people is going to think that it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So they don't think about the option 5, the 8, or the 19. When it's different, for example, in call centers, is how can I help you? And the customer says, hey, I need about this. With the WhatsApp, the balance or with the written channels, so to speak. So the balance between options or graphics comparing to more freedom in terms of just write whatever you like is something that usually we have as a challenge, no?
Right. So, and just to summarize, the expectations on voice calls it's very open-ended. Expectations on written channels is usually you ask users to select a bunch of options, but the fifth option that doesn't exist might be the issue that they have. So you have to get those options very well bounded. And you could also do some chats where, you're just having a conversation on chat, but that has its challenges as well. And then just like sounds and identification of people has its challenges. So so basically, how have you solved this? How have you guys solved those problems with that? Like how all those different layers, the identification problem, the open-ended question problem, the bounded question problem. How have you guys attacked that? Because those are very general, and then you guys also have to apply it to every possible industry. So, which is going to be the next question. So show us how you talk to us about how you've been able to bound that. You know what I mean?
That's a very interesting question, because in the case of call centers, when we need the verification in terms of streets, names, or what we were talking about, what we are doing is to be a real omni-channel platform. So in this case, for example, it's like the customer is calling, and then we have the number, and we just verify that this number, for example, comes from a mobile phone. Okay, if that's a mobile phone, then we say, okay, we are sending right now an SMS, and please send me your full name, or give me the address, where are you, no? So then you receive the SMS, Amelia is waiting in the call until you send the SMS, and then once Amelia receives it, say, okay, I received that your name is Victor Garayar, so then please, let's continue with the next questions of the call. So that's the beauty that we have right now, the balance between having a real omni-channel platform in which we still in the call, and then we can go through, I don't know, WhatsApp, SMS, or whatever it is, and then we continue the call with the customer without any issues. So that's one side of these problems. And in the other side, for example, with written channels, what we start is like we make phases of the implementations, because what right now the customer is used to interact is basically with buttons, with options, and so on. And usually what in written channels or in social media, WhatsApp, SMS, what they expect for is to start with a few use cases or a few requests. So we usually start with 1, 2, 3, 4 because you only have the 1, 2, 3, 4 options. But then what the customer is getting used to are, and probably we open the questions in order to get what other kind of requests the customer is asking for. Then we select, or we can analyze all the information and say, hey, the fifth option can be this. And then we start opening. So so just to summarize, we start closing the implementation. We close the scope with 1, 2, 3, 4, but then we start opening based on how the customer behaves, what are the requests from the customer. So that's more or less how we address this situation.
So at least for the written channels, it's you're doing something I think is unique, which is sort of generative questions, in the sense that it learns in the call what questions the next question to ask, but it's not necessarily a pre-existing list. It's a list that is something that's emerged from the conversation. So how do you is there a way to make sure? Is there a way to make sure that it's always it doesn't hallucinate in the question it's trying to ask, or not to make sure, but try to bind? Is there a way to bound because these models have a tendency to hallucinate? So if you're allowing them to generate questions based on the context of the user, or at that particular moment, it can hallucinate. So how have you been confident that every emergent question is, it doesn't take much, maybe even a word that, that's present tense or past tense or some sort of like grammatical addition that can make it mean something else and lead the customer in a different direction, even though it's mostly correct, in terms of just even like identifications of things. So is there, that's a very hard problem because it's the hallucination is actually a feature of AI. So how have you guys been able to deal with that?
That's a very interesting question. So what we usually do is like we separate this in 3 layers. Okay. The first layer is the intents or the request that we know that exists. Okay. Even though that we have the 4 options that we were talking about, we know that usually customers go for the 5th to the 15th. So we try to train the model good enough to capture those requests and say, hey, I'm not trained yet, but I would love to attend this kind of request. So let me transfer you to my human colleague. Okay. Then what we do is like at a second layer. The second layer, depending on how the customer, what kind of documentation and information they have. So we use generative AI in terms of depending on each documentation that they have. No? They have policies, or they have some documents that we can use to, or maybe information from the web, and saying, okay, we can answer those kind of questions based on this specific information. Okay. Then probably you will have some hallucination, but we try to encapsulate as much as we can. So it's not like a bunch of documents. We need to really check that the information that we have doesn't overlap so much among each other and so on. And then finally...
Why is the overlap a risk, if you don't mind me asking? Like, why is the overlapping documentation becoming an issue? Go ahead.
That's a very good question, because it makes you hallucinate more.
Because of you doubling down on the data?
Exactly. So probably, I don't know, if you are calling about, to block a card, but then you have in the banking industry, but then you have the block of the card, block of the account, to block, I don't know, your mobile user, no, in the mobile app. Blocking can be anywhere. So probably the blocking part can overlap. So I'm saying very simple example, no? But the blocking, some sort, can generate an answer that you not necessarily are waiting for, no? So you are giving for to reset your password in the mobile app, and you're asking for your blocking of your credit card. No, so these kind of things probably may happen. So that's why we are very careful on what kind of documentation or what kind of information we are including into the model. So in B2B, you cannot afford so much those hallucinations. That's the problem,
Right. So there's a lot of cleaning that has to happen. We don't know for this to work out. Yeah. And so I think this is a good segue into the idea of integration, because this is a very general solution. As general as it is, it still needs to be massaged quite thoroughly into a company's context. It's essentially a generic model that, once you massage into a company's context, can have utility in the space of communicating with customers from that. So, that's quite the challenge. You alluded to some of the ways that you attack that challenge with deduplication of information. But if we were to start again and talk about, in general, how do you approach integrating into organizations and sort of make it, plan out how this solution can, sit in the right place and have conversations with customers there's just a myriad of technologies that people use and a myriad of ways that they store it. There's just so many opportunities for a problem. So how do you guys systematize that in a way that your outcomes are consistent?
That's a very good question. So in this case, what we try to do is we are very close to the company. In what sense? To check the data. At the end of the day, AI goes to data, goes through data. So, and if we want to make an impact, should be for the request the customer does, and that has the more volume, so to speak. Okay. So what we usually do is, either if this is call center or written channel, whatever we were speaking. So in terms of channels, what we try to do is get as much as data as we have. So why? Because then we can answer some questions. What kind of requests the customer usually does? No? Then what are the complexities of those requests? And finally, if this is something that as a company is able to solve with integrations, because the idea is not only understand, hey, I need to block my card. Yeah, perfect. I understand that you will want to block the card. I cannot block your card. So what is the utility here? So there is no impact. At the end of the day, we need to block the card and say, hey, your card, which ends in 1234, is blocked right now. And for instance, you are going to receive an SMS with a number, so you can go to the bank branch and then you can ask for a new card, or you have this link so you can ask for your new card, so they're going to deliver in your home. So this kind of thing is something that is very powerful and impactful for the company and also for the customer. So this is the three layers or the three columns that we try to do. One is the volume of requests. So we go for what I call the 80-20. The 80% of the calls should go for probably 10, 20, or 25 requests. Then of those requests, what are the ones that we really can understand? And finally, from those that I can understand, what are the ones that I really can integrate and can really resolve? So that's our goal: resolve.
Is there a percentage that you guys try to attack on, at this level? This is where the technology has maximum effect. And what I mean by that is, you said 80-10 rule, which is great. But it's a sort of, if of the 80%, we have to have a 60% accuracy, which is really high because you're cutting in half operation costs basically. But that you guys really sort of want to go for. Is there a boundary there? Because I can imagine this, like every industry, the complexity of the questions that they get in these calls is going to differ. So that even something like as simple as like, the amount of data for airlines is different from the amount of data for banks, right? In the sense of how much it moves. The airline data disappears every time, right? And banking data just grows in the steady and literally is kept in the safe, right? So there's a lot of that. So just speak to that. So these different kinds of these different spaces. How do you measure a consistent level of success with that in mind, with all this in mind? Because you have to make sure that Amelia improves in general, as a general solution.
Exactly. No, so that's why we are very close with companies to get whatever we need to go for, because there are different kind of strategies. So there are strategies, for example, that we have with some of the customers saying, "Hey, I want Amelia in the front." Just understanding any request that she has, and then a percentage is going to be resolved, and then another percentage is going to be transferred to a human agent. Because what we were talking about is like, if you have options, you reduce the scope. When you don't have options, the customer is able to express whatever they want, and then goes to the correct part of the tree that you have in a call center, not either a human agent or with Amelia. So that's a good thing. So based on that, so we make the numbers. The idea is that, for example, in every use case, depend on the request, on what we call the use case, we can go for an understanding around 70% at the beginning to 90 plus in 3, 4 to 6 months, which is high. It's very high. I know. Yeah, and it's very fast. Yeah. And but this is something that we could get based on experience and the how robust is the platform right now. And then aside the understanding on the accuracy, then is how much of these requests we are able to really resolve. And that's a tricky question, because then we need the company APIs to make the effort, And the idea is that we usually, what we want to do is like we make business cases with our customers. That's our difference probably with other platforms. Maybe they do the same or not, but this is what we try to do. Okay, let's make a business plan, because you are going to put some X money and we want to return Y money, and it's going to return in some amount of months, or probably during the first year or during the beginning of the second year, depending on what is the scope around. No, so that's a more or less the idea. So looking for 70 to 90% of accuracy in the first 6 months, and then let's see that we can resolve, depending on each use case, between the 50 to 70 to 80% of them. So you are at the end of the day, you are talking about 40 to 70, 75% of the resolution of each request. So we have customers right now that we are receiving 5 million calls in the use cases that we can
5 million calls a day, or
5 million calls a month. So more or less 150,000, 100,000 calls per day. And so from the ones that we are 40% of all the requests, we are able to solve. And from them, we are more or less between 75 to 85% of resolution. And the accuracy...
on average across organizations.
Exactly. And the accuracy of all that we have right now is about 93% in the first attempt, sorry. So we are more in 95, 96% because we have 2 to 3 attempts. But that's powerful, for example, in one of the customers. We have others that is more complex, as we said, because we are in insurance and we need to go for the geolocation. And this is quite tricky because we need some omni-channel, as I said, no? Some of them are able to respond on the SMS with some APIs and so on. But funny thing is, like, for example, the resolution. So we were measuring the resolution of the human agents, and they were more or less between 50 to 55%. So from the 100 calls, they were able to register properly a call in 50 or 55 calls from the 100. We are in the same level right now with them, and we are increasing. So that's quite interesting of what we do. We are able, I don't want to say to replace what the human agent does, but at least to support the human agent and the companies. And then the human agents are able to do whatever it goes beyond that, because they have the creativity, they have the negotiation part, they have anything else. And we make companies to grow in that way, no?
Right. So I think one question is to go in the opposite direction, which is how do you manage with all the success of the platform in terms of its ability to alleviate issues, and when it comes from the customer side, what if they expect 100%? So how do you manage? Which is not, I think it's safe to say is very hard to do, and it probably not possible for quite a while. But how do you manage that expectation? How do you get them to, how do you show them where the boundary is safest to draw, and then flip over to, because they will have some success and they will be able to optimize or reduce operation costs, but they may have a goal number that they wanted. And I've had that issue myself where there's a lack of understanding of the technology, and which is normal because it's new. But and there's an expectation for it to replace completely, but it just can't yet. And then how do you have that conversation quickly? Because then a lot of people don't want to hear it.
No, that's a very interesting topic, because this is one of the things why I like to be in this industry, is because you constantly need to talk with customers, to educate each other. So because I'm educating all the time, I'm learning all the time from the different processes that each industry they have, and every characteristic or particularity that they have, no? So I have almost 20 years of experience in implementing ERP, CRM, and now AI in different kind of industries. And every time that I go to a customer, I find something else, which is amazing. And in the opposite way, it's also interesting, because you need to educate the customers in the way what to expect from the platform. Otherwise, if you don't align the expectation with the customers, what will happen is like, no, what you said, not I'm expecting 60%, and you know that 60% is already high, but I'm telling you that I am in 70 to 85%. I say, oh, that's interesting, but how do you know that this for people that not necessarily know about the industry, that 70 or 85% is a good number? They say it's just 85. No, that's not possible. So I was expecting, as you said, 100%. Why is not 100%?
Yeah, why isn't 100? Yeah, and everybody in the whole world talks about how 100% it is when you see these models, fake human beings talking and all that. It's like they thinking that's what they're gonna get, and the marketing is powerful, but the reality is when you get into the weeds, it's tough to make. It's very hard to make.
Exactly. And what I usually do is like make examples with human. So so do you have 100% of accuracy? Not necessarily.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So if you want,
every time that you have a call with a human agent, it's like, hey, I'm sorry. So in my case, Garayar, my my last name. I understand from my 40 years that I have already how to spell. So G of Guatemala, A of Argentina, R of rah, 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 rah. So because you have experience on that, and why you have that experience, because there are so many people around that cannot understand your last name. And that's accuracy. So that's why the 100% not necessarily is possible, because not even the human agents or human people are able to understand 100%. So that's more or less what I say. No, for example, when people say it's like, why do you need APIs? So I think that you probably need, so just with FAQs, you are able to solve some of the questions, and you can contain some of the code that you have, which is true. But then what I say, for example, is you will hire a human agent just to talk with your customer and just say, hey, yes, the day was pretty good. And I have this document that the policy said something, but I cannot resolve you right now. So how do you feel about? No, is that really impactful for your company to have a human agent just sitting and talking and chatting with your customer? Not necessarily. So you need to resolve the problems that your customer has because you are customer centric, So these kind of examples is how I try to tell customers what to expect in these kind of solutions. And having a baseline, we can grow. What I say is like, let's start very quick, small, quick, and then the idea is that we can improve in a very good way. So that's why in 6 months we are able to go from 70, 75 to 90% because we have a reduced scope. We do it quickly. We understand our customer because every customer has a different behavior, even though it can be in the same industry. So once we understand how the customer behaves, we can improve Amelia as much as we can.
When you were talking about the voice channel, how do you guys attack the problem of tone, communicating emotion in the language? I think one of the interesting things with AI is its ability to do that. We've had autonomous systems communicate sort of very digitally to us, for many, many years, and everyone does everything they can to press zero as fast as possible. So I think Amelia's difference, I guess, is it's actually being able to solve those problems with a person feeling like, hey, they got the answer. Because there's a difference between getting the answer or feeling like you got the answer. A lot of customer service is the latter, feeling like you got an answer. So how does Amelia deal with it? It's kind of a difficult question, but all the previous conversation was to frame the problem and then see, how do you get to that point? How does Amelia do that? Because that's, I think, I might be wrong, but I think that's what's different from all these other platforms in terms of all the previous platforms of the previous generation of platforms. People feel like they got an answer, and that's how you get to the 60, 70, 80%.
No, that's very interesting because tone is something that is very tricky right now. And sarcasm is something that is something that probably when we get to that point to find out what is sarcasm or not, like the AI is going to be in the next level, to be honest. What we try to do is basically check not necessarily the tone, but what they say, what the people say. So again, I have to tell you this. So why I need to repeat or so these kind of expressions that give you a sense of frustration. So then what we try to do is, okay, let's stop here. I can transfer to a human agent. Don't worry. Okay. And in the other side as well, because what we try to do is like, for example, use cases of outbound calls for collections. You call, say, hey, you have a debt with us. Not necessarily is the greatest call that we will have because you owe me money, So how can we address these kind of things? No. But in these kind of cases, what we try to do is not only say, hey, you owe me money, so when you are going to pay me, is also, why don't you pay me? So what is the reason of the debt behind that? And probably it's because, for example, in telcos, you didn't resolve that problems. I don't have I have problems with my internet at home every month. So why I should pay you? No? Then you find out that not necessarily is the problem, is a technical problem that you may address. So information is key here. So sometimes it's thinking out of the box in some specific use cases. So you have more information and sometimes you get better results only with information that you have, no?
Right. Okay. So I think that's very, sort of well put. And basically, as soon as you can, divert it to a human person who can better deal with frustration until the technology has gotten to the point where it can really do that. And that's very challenging because he also has to know that it's wrong because sometimes humans, like you said at the beginning, humans, someone could be sarcastic, you didn't notice. So what a human can't notice, a robot might. I think I said this to someone. I said, if you have something that's more human-like, you get all the flaws as well, including hallucination, misunderstanding, all these things. So it's you feel like you're getting some. The only difference is that it stays up at night, but it's just a person. I mean, that you're gonna get everything you wanted. But let's talk a little bit about technology. So we've talked, because it's a very tough thing to make, right? So and this is a technology conversation, but we really, I think, framed all the different kind of problems that you guys are solving. So we'll talk a little bit about, let's talk directly about architecture and design and things of that nature. The obvious thing is you will be collecting a lot of customer information and sort of like stitching it to the pipeline of the platform. My assumption is that it's a general model that is going to take that into consideration. It'll need to be trained, and the model will need to be cleaned. And that's sort of the standard for ML solutions. So could you talk a little bit about that and sort of how Amelia is able to, and for the people who are interested in technology or who are watching, deal with these problems and make this happen, because it's interesting.
Yeah. In this case, we have a combination of, first, a general model, as you say, no? When Amelia is able to understand, I don't know, basic questions, what is her name, what is her creator, or that, whatever, what we call the social dog. And then what we have in another layer is pre-trained models. For example, it's different when we talk about banking than insurance, than telco, and airlines, hospitality, and so on. So based on the experience that we have, what we try to do is we train already some intents, just as a support, because then what we know and what we were discussing before is every company has their particularity. So based on that, this is a very good thing to have, because it accelerates the process of implementation. But then you need some specific phrases or how the customers express themselves in order to include on top of that model.
So we have pre-trained models based on industry.
Exactly.
That sits adjacent to the basic Amelia general solution.
We have the general solution, we have the pre-trained, and then we have the specific training, so to speak. And for instance, another layer is the tropicalization, what we call, because, for example, a word in US probably can be different in Australia or in UK. The same thing happens in Chile comparing to Peru or Colombia or Mexico. So then we have kind of a dictionary depending on the geography that you are. So you can find the differences. So these are the 4 layers of that we have for training. No, the general, then they go for the industry, then for the specifics, and finally probably. So you have the country base or
So for the we'll go backwards from the most superficial layer. If we talk about the layer that's geolocated, there's a level of granularity that you can't do. You can argue, even though it would be a sort of a silly argument, that you can have a layer for each person, that's specifically the way they talk. And that's the most, it might actually end up being true eventually. We just don't have technology for it. But just to get to the actual question, what is the radius of that particular model at that layer? What does that mean? Is the radius the size of the country or the size of the town? Does that make sense?
Makes total sense, and depends on the company. Depends on what we're going to do. Some people, experience based, we usually go for the country level, because sometimes the cities is very small. So AI at the end of the day is an statistic model. So I'm so sorry, I too simplistic. No, so just to put it in simple words, it's not like that. I'm so sorry. Apologize first. But at the end of the day, it's a sample. So if we want to be very effective, let's use the sample. And the sample is going to be more country-based rather than city-based. So that's more or less the explanation behind it.
Okay, got it. And is that because it only produces valuable results at that scale, or because so it takes that much data to actually get you what you're looking for, and you do this per organization. So so what happens if an organization doesn't have enough data? If it takes that much data countrywide to get a valuable set, then what happens if an organization? I would assume that there are certain sizes of organizations you cannot deal with because they just don't have the amount of data you need to provide the kind of.
We start with something. We start with the general and the industry and the specifics. So let's start with the methodology that we have. Let's start small, quick, and then the customer is going to tell you whatever they are going to tell, and then the idea is to improve. The key thing is how fast you can improve whatever the customer says. So that's the most powerful part that we have in Amelia. So at the beginning we have what we call the hypercare. So we put Amelia in production. So it's released to the customer, and then we start analyzing all the time what the customer says, what are different kind of words, etc., etc. So at the beginning of the first 1, 2 to 3 months, we are able to say, hey, Amelia is good enough to have a very good volume, to have a very good impact. It doesn't mean that that's all, folks. There is no more work to do. No, obviously, as any IT solution, so there is a continuous improvement. There is a customer changes, organization changes, and why Amelia shouldn't change, So that's more or less the methodology we have.
So so that's the first. That's the most. That's the layer that you see or you hit initially. And the second, I forgot what the second layer was, or the layer below that. What was that?
So we have the general, then we have the industry based.
The industry. Okay, and then for the industry, right? Got it. So for the industry based, and this is so that I guess my question there is, how do you go about collecting that? So is it an amalgam of a bunch of companies that you've interacted with, and you say, okay, we're going to stuff this in here because it matches? Or did you go out and collect it in general from the web or from a different source?
Good. There is a combination of. First is based on experience on previous customers, so based on what we have trained. So I already have 6 years in the company. So I have 6 years of experience with different customers, with different industries and so on. In the same way we have different kind of NLU architects, what we call. So these guys are the ones who really put an architecture of intents and data and so on, and then train the model, and then create the model first. And based on that, they start improving the model. So that's basically what they do. And but also what we have is people like me that has done many work before Amelia in different kind of industries, not necessarily in the AI world, but they know the processes. What kind of processes do we have in banking, in telco, in hospitality, etc., etc. So based on that knowledge, also we create. So we have, okay, how many intents or how many data do we have in this model? Okay, we have X amount. Okay, I think that we need to increase for this 10 or 100 or whatever the amount is of intents that we need to put on top of that. So that's more or less what we do. So this is a combination, previous experiences in terms of customers, but also previous experiences in terms of personally speaking, what kind of processes what we have seen before.
And also to keep all this in context, are you consistently piping in or what's your cycle of improvement? Is it just the model will continue to improve based on having more and more data? And then obviously there are mechanisms to make sure that the data that you're getting is net improving the accuracy of the model. Like, for example, you talk at the top of the hour about deduplication, right? So how do you first of all are you is it a live process where you just plug it in and it has its way of making sure that it improves? And then the second question is whether you plug it in or not, what are the mechanisms to ensure that the quality of the model isn't affected by the new information to an inordinate degree, right? So something like an airline may, or some other, you may have a new customer that's such a big airline or such a big XYZ that the amount of information is double what you had before. So now everything is about this as opposed to just in general, right? I'm making an assumption, but it is a stats model. So it's really about how much of this, what's the average, and the average is skewed in one direction. So how do you get the average not be skewed in one direction or the other? How do you make sure that it doesn't hallucinate because of duplication? So how do you deal with all these possible issues to make sure the model stays general, regardless of who it's interacting with?
This is more or less what you say. So this is a general. At the end of the day, it's going to be a general model, and this is something that we, as a company, we understand. This is an accelerator. This is not going to be just a plug and play. That's not possible because every company has their particularities. So what we say is like we put the general model plus the industry model, and then what we do is like we talk with the customer, saying what is the in terms of comparison of what we have versus what they have, no? What are the gaps, and based on that we train the model based on the different the differences that we have.
Right. So you separate it out and you separate it out and you give it to them, right? And then it's theirs, and then sort of you can replace the base, but the base is managed by Amelia, and then put back, but it's not like directly integrated. It doesn't work that way.
Exactly. At the end of the day, what we do is like a specific implementation for every customer. What we use is accelerators or assets that we already have. Yeah.
Well, Victor, thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for answering all the questions.
No problem at all. I enjoy it.
I hope so. I've tried to make sure it was interesting for you, and I've tried to simplify it as much as possible because I feel like this is one of those things that you could talk about for hours and hours, but and you barely understand. But I tried to sort of make it easy to digest, and thank you for playing along. So I appreciate it.
No. I appreciate the invitation. As I said, so I really enjoy it. I enjoy talking about these topics because you have so many stories behind, and it's very interesting. It's very interesting because you learn a lot from companies. This is for people like me. So I really enjoy this.
Where can they find you?
Well, so if you have any questions, please go through my LinkedIn profile, Victor Garayar. Write to me there. Sometimes, depending on where I am more, so I'm faster than other days. Yeah. So just reach to me. So I think the best way is going through LinkedIn, and then based on that we can talk about any topic and so on. If you have any questions about your current initiatives, or how can AI or virtual agents can leverage from the company, or how impact what they can make and so on. So happy to talk, as you could see. I love the topic, so I can talk many hours about it.
Oh, Victor, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No, thank you so much, Chris. See you soon.